And before we started recording, we were just discussing how there's a fine line between art and ass. But this one was well over the line into ass.
Yeah.
But it might have come out through the other side, back into art again.
It was
Sir,
ass
it was
trying,
something.
hoping to pull it off looking like art by
Sir.
just throwing random shit together. And I think, I'm not going to bother trying to parse out what it was supposed to be a metaphor for, but I do think there was some kind of theme of temptation and overcoming, especially there's that scene of him like walking over all the drug paraphernalia. And there were other things like I think he resisted fucking and stuff like that. Like I don't know. There was some shit. Then he was walking around with a severed Saint Bernard head in a bag.
Yeah.
Came across a junkie lady. Oh yeah, she was the one who wanted to pork him, and he had to resist that. And then her legs exploded or something, and there was a scene where he was a cheap CGI worm.
That was pretty sick.
Yeah, he was a wereworm. But I think that was just a dream. Thank goodness, because like I didn't know how they were going to fit it into the plot.
It's either a dream or it's one of those psychotic states you're in when you're having a break and you're going on sort of a self-imposed vision quest. You sort of turn in on yourself and disappear up your own ass. So he was going through his life as a kid, growing up, being a prodigy, having trouble staying focused on being a prodigy and doing all the amazing things they wanted him to do, and got into drugs as a result, and then had the drugs get found out as they fall out of his clothes when he raises his arm to conduct that one that his mom is chiding on him to do in the front row. And suddenly everybody's ashamed of him, and he flees, he turns into a worm thing. His body just feels weird and wriggly, like he's just a floating head floating down the aisle. And that's that sort of dissociative state as he's running away from being the musical prodigy, the conductor he always was growing up. And he goes out and gets poor, and people start tearing him apart. There's that pastor in the church who sees him as somewhat unhinged, and as a result, somebody he can exploit. And that's when his clothes turn into money, and the pastor's pupils turn into little dollar signs, and he starts going after him and tearing off bits of his clothing, which are now bills. Yeah,
that irritated the shit out of me, honestly. Whenever they use like cheap ass symbolism, like they're tearing dollar bills off of him, and
there's your capitalism.
It's hurting him, like he's being torn apart, and it's like I'm sure we're supposed to be sitting there being like, man, this is like a real
so deep.
Yeah, this is a real deep kind of like poignant message about how capitalism is tearing us apart, man.
It was so ham-fisted. He was trying to figure out whether or not he should break his last $100 bill, and to depict that, he wakes up in the rain, draws himself out of the gutter, and he sees Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Jackson, and Ben Franklin fighting, like squaring off in the rain, and then they beat each other and they kick the crap out of Benjamin Franklin, who has 100 painted on his back.
Wow.
And Abraham Lincoln has a 5 because he's on the $5 bill, and he breaks his $100 bill into change so he could then go off and find shelter for the night. And
I do remember wondering why
over the top,
Lincoln was
but yeah, there's a good story underneath it. They just went way too ham-fisted. They could have done so much more.
Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.